In this video, I will be attempting to beat Pokemon Leaf Green while only using Psychic type Pokemon. But obviously Pokemon is a child's game, so I added a few rules to make it 10 times harder. The rules I will be following are on screen now, and also in the description below. Psychic type Pokemon that I will be able to use in this video are on screen as well. Alakazam in normal games is a trade evolution, but since trading is not possible, I have made it so Kadabra can evolve by a level up instead. Without further ado, let's get into it. I start by naming myself Bing and my rival Brawn, because the enemy of the brain is Brawn. Next, I went to Professor Oak's lab to get my starter. Since there are no Psychic type Pokemon available before Misty, I decided to give myself a Drowsy, who I decided to name Toes. Brawn decides to challenge me to a battle and show off his muscles, but Toes proves too powerful for him and pounds his Bulbasaur into oblivion. I then rushed out of Oak's lab and trained Toes up to level 10 before running into Route 22 to fight my rival for the second time. Brawn starts the fight by leading with his Pidgey, who hits Toes with a couple sand attacks, causing me to miss 2 Hypnosises before landing the third. Toes then proceeds to pound Pidgey until it is knocked out. Brawn brings in his Bulbasaur next, which I hit with a Hypnosis, but then Toes misses his pound and Bulbasaur wakes up on the first turn. Like, what are the chances of that? Toes then misses a Hypnosis while getting hit with tackles before putting Bulbasaur to sleep again. Toes then starts pounding him once more, but Bulbasaur wakes up and tackles me, taking Toes down to 7 HP before being taken out. That's a close one. After getting Toes up to level 14, matching Brock's ace Pokemon, I decide to take him on. Brock decides to start with his Geodude, which Toes swiftly takes out with only 2 confusions. Brock then sends in Ace Onyx, who hits me with a Bind before being put to sleep. Bind begins to do residual damage, but it is not enough, as he's then taken out by 3 confusions, but not before waking up and hitting Toes with one last Bind. And now with that, we have the Boulder Badge. I then breezed through Mount Moon and picked up God's Fossil, and made my way to this rolling city to find my rival. He then leads with his trusty Pidgeotto, which throws some sand in Toes' eyes before being put to sleep. Toes lands 2 confusions, with one being a critical hit putting Pidgeotto into the red, and confusing him, to which it knocks us up. Brawn then sends in his Rattata, which lowers Toes' defense with Tail Whip, but Toes hits back with a confusion. Rattata then lands 2 quick attacks, with one being a critical hit, putting Toes into the red before being taken out with a confusion. Brawn then brings in his Bulbasaur. Toes then proceeds to miss 2 Hypnosises, leading to his death, meaning I must restart. After catching back up, I decided to try something else, and attempted to beat Misty, but this also ended in failure. On my third run, I decided to teach my new Drowsy Mega Kick. I started the battle with Misty by hitting Staryu with a Mega Kick, taking half its health away. Then Staryu retaliates with a Water Pulse, confusing his junior, but I came prepared by giving her a Person Berry to cure the confusion. After that, I hit it with one more confusion, knocking it out. Misty then brings in her ace, Stommy, hitting Fingers Jr. with a Water Pulse, doing a ton of damage, but I put it to sleep with Hypnosis and then land 2 Mega Kicks in a row and 1 confusion before it wakes up. Starmie then hits Fingers Jr. with Water Pulse, taking her down to 2 HP, but one more Mega Kick ends the battle. Now it was time for my long-awaited rematch with Brawn, who once again starts with his Pidgeotto, who hits me with a Sand Attack before getting taken out by a Mega Kick and confusion. He follows up by sending in his Rattata, which avoids a confusion and lands a Tackle, which doesn't do much damage. It is then taken out with 2 confusions. Brawn is then forced to bring in his starter, Bulbasaur, who puts up a valiant fight, putting Fingers Jr. into the red before being brought down, but it was all for nothing, as his last Pokemon is an Abra, who can't attack me, and he gets taken out with a couple Mega Kicks. I then crossed the Nugget Bridge and called myself an Abra, and called him King, making him the 2nd team member. I then taught him Thief so I could train him up, and then evolved him to a Kadabra before taking on my rival, the SSN. He leads with his Pidgeotto, like usual, but King takes him out with relatively no trouble. Brawn then sends in his Raticate, which suffers the same fate as his Pidgeotto. His Kadabra is then brought in battle, but after missing a move, getting hit by 2 thieves, Kadabra is then put down. Ivysaur is then sent in, and due to a misinput I accidentally used Thief, doing next to no damage, leading to King being put to sleep. But he wakes up quickly and finishes it with a Psybeam. After obtaining Cut, I jumped off the boat to fight Lieutenant Surge, but this fight, realistically, was extremely easy, as his Voltorb and Pikachu both were taken out with a single Psybeam, and his Raichu suffered a beating as he got knocked out by 3 more Psybeams. After beating Lieutenant Surge, I then caught another Abra, but don't worry, this Abra is only being used to obtain Mr. Mime through trade with my 3rd team member. After a quick stroll through Rock Tunnel, I proceed to my 4th gym battle against Erica, Grass type gym leader, which in all honesty was also extremely easy, as her victory bell goes down without putting up much of a fight, much like the Tangler, who is put to sleep and taken out with critical hit Confusion. Her final Pokemon, Vileplume, comes in, paralyzes Fingers Jr. before being beaten by 2 Confusions, awarding me my 4th gym badge. After beating Erica, I immediately entered the casino to fight Team Rocket's boss, Giovanni. He leads with his Onix, which brings King down to half health, but he's recovered to regain the health back and knock the Onix out. Giovanni then brings in his Kangaskhan next, which hits King with a fake out, so I have to switch him out from Mr. Mime, who hits a couple Psybeams before also needing to be switched out for Fingers Jr., who knocks Kangaskhan out with 2 Confusions. Rhyhorn is brought out, and Fingers Jr. misses 3 consecutive Hypnosises before hitting the 4th one and knocking Rhyhorn out with 2 Confusions. On my way through the Pokemon Tower, I ran into Brawn, mourning the death of his Raticate. And what's the best way to mourn a death? A battle, obviously. He leads with his Pidgeotto, but because I was fairly overleveled for this battle, it was taken out by 2 Psybeams. He then brings in his new team member, Gyarados, who starts thrashing about, doing a good amount of damage before being brought down by Psybeam. Since Mr. Mime was getting low on health, I switched in Fingers Jr. to fight his Growlithe, who was taken out by 2 Confusions. As Brawn brings in his Kadabra, I decide to answer with my own Kadabra, which I take out with a single Thief. He then sends in his Bulbasaur, which is then taken out with a single Psybeam. After making my way to the top of the tower and saving Mr. Fuji, I get the Poké Flute, which gives me access to the Super Rod, which is key in this challenge as it allows me to get 3 new team members. So I start by catching myself a Slowpoke and naming him Flash. I then fished up a Staryu, named him Craig, but I evolved it straight away, as Staryu isn't a Psychic type, whereas Starmie is. Lastly, I went and caught myself a Poliwhirl. Yes, I understand it's not Psychic type, but it'll be used in a trade to get a Jinx. After getting the team up to around level 38, I decided to take on Koga. Although I came in 5 levels below the ace, it didn't really matter, as the fight itself was pretty easy, as he starts with a Coughing that gets one-shot by a Psybeam, and Muck follows and suffers a similar fate. He's 2-shot by a Psybeams. The second Coughing is obliterated by 1 Psybeam, like the first, and then came the Wheezing, which Koga tried his damn hardest to keep alive, but it ultimately fell after being hit with multiple Psybeams. After beating Koga, I decided to take a detour to the Safari Zone and got my final usable Pokemon, Execute, named and Scrambled, and then left him in the box to rot as he wasn't used throughout the entire game. Following the short detour, I rushed back to the Sylph Cove to take on my rival once again. This time, he starts with his newly evolved Pidgeot, but he doesn't last long. Jinx beats him down with a single Ice Punch. Brawn then brings in his Gyarados, which I swiftly put to sleep and hit with some Ice Punches, knocking it out, after Jinx is brought into the yellow. So I switch her out when Growlithe is brought in, and I send in Craig. Craig then ends the Growlithe with a Surf. Brawn then has to resort to using his Venusaur, so I switch in Mr. Mime, who is put to sleep, and doesn't wake up. It's brought into the red, so I am forced to switch him out for Fingers Jr., who knocks it out with 2 psychics. Alakazam is sent in as his final Pokemon, so I send in Flash to headbutt him into tomorrow. After the battle with Brawn is finished, King then evolves into an Alakazam, just in time for our second battle with Giovanni. With his new team, he starts with Nidorino, swiftly taken out with a Psybeam. Giovanni then brings out his ace, Nidoqueen, but she doesn't last long as it's beaten by 2 Psybeams after dealing half of Mr. Mime's damage with a Body Slam. He then sends in his trusty old Kangaskhan. He doesn't damage my Mr. Mime as he's eliminated by 2 Psybeams. He is now down to his last Pokemon, Rhyhorn, so I bring in my Slowpoke, who brought down the Rhyhorn with water guns, ending Giovanni's reign of Silco and getting myself a Master Ball. Just before fighting Sabrina, I evolved Flash into a Slowbro. The battle with Sabrina starts with her sending in a Kadabra, but ends the Kadabra with 2 Thieves. Sabrina then sends in her Venomoth, so I decided to switch into Jinx, who ate a Leech Life while knocking Venomoth out with a single Psychic. Mr. Mime is then brought out next, but Jinx takes it down with 2 Ice Punches. Sabrina is now left with her ace Pokemon, Alakazam. Doesn't get a chance to put up a fight as I put it to sleep and then punch it a couple times, landing a critical hit, knocking it out, and giving me my 6th gym badge. After beating Sabrina, I do the responsible thing and use my Master Ball on a Spearow so I can fly around the region. After exploring the Pokemon Mansion and collecting the secret key, I go and challenge Blaine, but if I'm being honest, Blaine was a pushover, as I knocked his Growlithe out with a single surf, destroy his Arcanine with some tidal waves. After he heals his Arcanine with multiple potions, I then knocked out both of his remaining Pokemon, Ponyta and Rapidash, with a few more surfs, getting us the 7th gym badge. After training my team up a little, I decided to take on Giovanni for the final time in his gym, but much like the Blaine battle, he didn't put up much of a fight, as his Rhyhorn is taken out by a surf from Starmie. His Dugtrio suffers the same outcome, and then he sends in his Nidoqueen, who also couldn't withstand the power of Craig's waves. And much like the Nidoqueen, his Nidoking is also taken down by a surf. And in comes his final Rhyhorn, which for some reason is level 50. Why he has a Rhyhorn still is baffling. Before getting the chance to take on the Elite Four, my rival demands a fight. Once again, he leads with his ever so trusty Pidgeot, but I lead my Jinx, which knocks him out with a single Ice Punch. He, for some reason, also has a Rhyhorn at level 45. Why doesn't anyone in this game evolve their Rhyhorns? Either way, it is taken out with a single Ice Beam, which leads to him bringing in his Growlithe. So I switch in Craig, who knocks him out with a Surf, but then I have to switch Jinx back in as Brawn brings out his Venusaur, but he's beaten by 2 Ice Beams. Gyarados is then sent in, but I used Craig, who had Thunderbolt, which knocks him out with 1 hit, and his last mon, Alakazam, is then taken out by a Surf. Now it is finally time to take on the Elite Four, starting Ice type trainer Lorelei. Now my god was just an annoying fight. This battle took me way too long. Lorelei starts with her Dugong, which is beaten by 2 Thunderbolts, which is pretty easy. And then her Lapras was brought in. This thing, the bane of my existence in this battle, battle had to be sped up so much faster than the rest of the fight, because it took so long as it was just constant paralysis and confusion, but it was finally brought down with a Thunderbolt. Next up was her Cloyster, and it also caused me so much pain, as I just kept getting paralyzed again, and when I wasn't paralyzed it would just protect, but after a few turns Cloyster finally goes down to the Thunderbolt also. Her Slowbro is then thrown in, but it gets taken out by 2 Thunderbolts, and now Lorelei is left with Jinx. But because the damage Craig suffered, I had to sub him out for Fingers Jr., who hits a Psychic, but is then frozen. So I was forced to switch again. I use my own Jinx, to which I use Ice Punch, before she is then also put to sleep, making me switch to Mr. Mime, who lands a psychic on Jinx before he is also put to sleep. So I am now forced to throw in Flash, who then takes her out with a single strength. And that brings me our first win in the Elite Four. Now it was time to move on to Bruno, who starts with his Onyx, but it is knocked out swiftly by a Surf. Hitmonchan is then brought into the battle, but he is also swiftly beaten by 2 more Surfs. He then sends in his Hitmonlee, who suffers the same fate. Bruno then brings out his second Onyx, but I bring in Flash, who beats Onyx with a Surf. And now Bruno was left with his Machamp, but he's taken out by 2 more Psychics. Next up was Agatha. Well, by God, she must have been the easiest fight in the entire game, as all of her Pokemon literally one hit by Psychics. Time for the fight with the final member of the Elite Four, Lance, who wasn't very difficult as he leads with his Gyarados, which is taken out by King's Shockwaves. He then brings out an Aerodactyl, but I switch in Craig, who then takes it out with 2 Surfs. Lance then sends out his 2 Dragonairs, which both suffer defeat to the Ice Beams from my Jinx. And lastly, his Dragonite also loses to the power of my Jinx's Ice Beams. Finally, it's time for battle with the champion, our arch enemy Braun, who always likes to lead with a Pidgeot. And unlike previous battles, I led with Starmie this time, but the outcome turns out to be the same as either way, as Pidgeot is taken out by a couple Thunderbolts. Braun then sends in his Arcanine, which I hit with a Surf, putting him into the red, but Braun heals him up, and because of my stupidity, Craig dies to an extreme speed. I was hoping to make it through the whole game without a death, but it wasn't meant to be. To retaliate, I bring in King to end him with a Shadow Ball. Gyarados is then sent out, but it is taken down by 2 Shockwaves. Braun then brings in his Alakazam, so I brought out Flash, hits a Surface, and for some reason he switches his Alakazam out for a Venusaur who eats a strength from Flash. I then switched into Jinx to take out the Venusaur with a single Ice Beam. His Rhydon is then sent in, but it was destroyed with an Ice Beam. And his Alakazam is then brought in for a second time, only to be defeated by an Ice Beam, making us the new champions of Kanto and completing the challenge. And there you have it. That is how I beat Pokemon Leaf Green with only using Psychic type Pokemon. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, why not think about leaving a like or possibly subscribing? Well, that's all. Hope to see you next time.